Hey everyone, it's Denise Brown. Today we're going to look at a way to tap into your expertise. And we're actually going to do that by looking a little more closely at your terrible times. Now, I appreciate no one really wants to look more closely at the terrible times. I did this a couple years ago, which is what inspired this workshop. I just couldn't imagine any more terrible times happening. And I thought, well, why are these terrible times happening? And what I realized is if I get a little more, I guess, observant about the terrible times, then I can actually look at what's the expertise that I can pull out of those terrible times. Okay, so let's start. Just a little bit about me. I started working with and supporting family caregivers in 1990. And then I started a small business to support them in 1995, and I continued to help and support them. I cared for both parents. My brother died unexpectedly before either parent, which was a terrible time, just absolutely terrible time. A year to the day after my brother died, my mom died. And then 11 months later, my dad died. And then another year later, my sister-in-law died. So my brother's widow. Oh, yeah, terrible. This is what we're going to do today. We're going to take a little bit of a closer look at our terrible time. We're going to look at how it could be our healing time, and then we're going to pull out our expertise. And when we look at the terrible time, I think it's helpful if we detach a little bit and look at it from the perspective of someone watching us and how we're managing during a terrible time. We know what it feels like during the terrible time. We lived through the terrible time. For this exercise, I'd love for you to step back and be an observer to yourself, which sounds a little odd, but we can actually put a little distance between ourselves and the terrible time by becoming an observer. We can really gain a perspective of looking at how we managed. And as we look at how we manage, we'll be able to pull out what helped us, which then becomes the expertise that we gained. Here's how we're going to do it. It's by mapping it out on a timeline. So go ahead and take out some paper and pen and pick a terrible time. And the terrible time could actually include lots of really difficult moments. It could span over a few years, or it could be just a few days. It's yours, so you get to pick the actual time period. And when you think about that time period, now you're going to think about moments during that time that felt particularly important. The moments could be important because of a decision you had to make, a choice you had to make, an action you had to take, or because of this steamrolling impact. For instance, it felt like, oh my gosh, you woke up to something already difficult, and then that day brought on more difficulties. Whatever feels significant to you during those terrible times, that's what you're going to map out. And again, your timeline is whatever you want it to be: years, months, days, moments. And then what you're going to do is map out what's significant along that timeline. It could be words you heard. It could be what you witnessed. When we're caring for family members, we witness a lot of really difficulties. It could be that you witnessed a sudden decline in your carry or a terrible fall your carry took. or a significant medical event. It could be that you were in the doctor's office with your carry and you heard really life-altering news. Again, it's your timeline, and then you can pick whatever moments feel significant to you. And again, you're taking this perspective of the observer. If you feel better, you could think about being above yourself as you watch what happens. So you have your timeline, you have significant moments along the timeline, and now you're going to think through as you look at yourself managing these terrible times. What are the thoughts that you now have about what you did that give you peace? For instance, if it's a significant moment because you're in the doctor's office receiving difficult news about your carrying, you can think about that moment that you received it and your thoughts were about comforting your carry. You can take great peace in that moment. You can decide not to add in other moments where you think, oh, I wish I would have been better. Because honestly, in the terrible times, I really believe it's not possible for us to look back and decide we should have been better. There's nothing better we could have done during our terrible times. Nothing. I really believe that. We were doing our best during these terrible times. Now, when we look back, we have this, perfect rear view mirror that shows us what we could have done differently. That's not what this is about. It's about looking at ourselves with compassion and seeing that there were certain moments where we really managed well during difficult times. And it could be we managed well because we didn't say anything. Like someone said something awful to you during this terrible time, and you just said, I'm walking away. You can take great peace in your ability to walk away because that's hard to do, right? There was a time, I guess one of my difficult days was the day that the hospital bed was arriving for my mom who was dying. And it was a terrible day. And my dad, it was very difficult for my dad to do anything other than think of himself. And so I managed his narcissism throughout my life, and particularly during caregiving. The hospital bed is set to arrive. I get to their apartment early to make sure everything's okay. And my dad shows me this diagram of how he wants all the furniture moved within their two-bedroom apartment. And my thought was we were moving two pieces of furniture. And I was mad. I said, Dad, we're not doing that today. We're just moving a few pieces of furniture. We're doing this in a way that's as easy as possible. My mom is in her recliner. You can tell what is happening to her. Life is just moving out of her body. She was very resistant to hospice. I finally got her to agree to it. So the next step is this hospital bed. And I know what it's going to be like for her. So I'm really mad at my dad and I lose my temper. And then my brother comes and I say, he wants us to move the whole apartment around. And my brother is very amenable to whatever my dad wants, which makes me kind of crazy. I think side. So he's like, yeah, that's okay. I'm like, what are you talking about? So I lose my temper again with both of them. What are you talking about? I say, this is a terrible day. This is a terrible day. The hospital bed is coming for my mom, for our mom. And I say this in front of my dad and my brother and my mom. And so my brother stands back and he says, yes, This is a terrible day. Now, my brother tells this story regularly. He just told it a couple months ago at Christmas Eve when we got together. My parents have both died since this day. And they always make fun of me for losing my temper and being so mean about this. And afterwards, I thought, you know what? I stood up for my mom, who later said to me, "What is going on with your father? I don't want all this commotion. I want peace." And I said, "I know, I'm doing my best." Then the other thing I thought is I gave my brother words to say out loud about what this day was like. It was a terrible day. It was a terrible day. So the story they like to tell about me is that I was very impatient and mean to our father. And now the story I tell is I advocated for my mom when no one else was going to. And I actually put into words what everybody was feeling. This is a terrible day. So I have peace about that day. I used to have regrets and I used to feel kind of bad about it, a little embarrassed about it, because the story they told was, oh my gosh, Denise really lost her patience. She was so mean that day. Thought I wasn't mean, I was advocating. I was telling people what was happening. It was a terrible day. So now I have peace about that. I feel good that I advocated for my mom when no one else would. Now we kind of did move an- all the furniture around for my dad because my sister also was like, yeah, whatever, we're just going to do it. And it made the day worse, to be honest with you. It was a terrible day. Anyway, but I feel like, yeah, I had the gumption to stand up to my dad. No one else did, and he made it a worse day. And I did my best to make it an easier day. So on that day, I don't talk about how I lost my patience. I now talk about how I advocated and gave words to what everybody was feeling. No one else was going to say it. I feel so much better. We can tell the story that's right for us about our terrible times. We don't have to have someone else tell the story. I think that's so important. It's our story. We get to decide what story we tell that gives us peace. So now you have this timeline, you have significant moments, and then you're going to add in significant moments about how you acted or how you responded or how you advocated or how you made it happen. And those significant moments give you peace. You weren't just standing back, letting everything just happen. You were in the middle of it, making the best of it. We need to really focus on that. That's what gives you peace. For many of us, we had family members who really were detached. When it got hard, they were like, oh man, I don't know what to do. So they detached, but we never detached in that way. We stayed in the middle of it and did what we could to make it better. That terrible day where the hospital bed was delivered and I had such a terrible argument with my dad, my sister and brother left after they had pizza and after they were like, oh yeah, the apartment looks as best as it's going to be. They left. I stayed. I stayed. I stayed. And then I got there. I stayed until my mom was comfy and cozy in the hospital bed. It was in the summer, so they had the Cubs game on. My dad was in the recliner. My mom was in the hospital bed. They were together in the same room. They were watching the Cubs game. They had a little bit of a light on, which I know is a fall risk for my dad, but it just looked so cozy. And I left when they were in a good place. I saw that. My sister and brother didn't. They didn't call me later that day and say, how did it go after we left? And then I got there very early the next morning to make sure I was there before my mom got up. My mom woke up. She didn't get up. She was in the hospital bed. But before she woke up, before my dad woke up, I stayed that whole day. They didn't call, they didn't come. Yeah, so for them to tell a story about me, I think that's, you know what. Anyway, so we can decide the story we tell about these terrible times, and the story is that you stayed in it. Oh, you didn't say this is hard. I think, oh, whoops, I think I gotta go. No, no. So when you look at your timeline, you could think about the terrible times, and all you have to look at is, I stayed. That's peace. You stayed. Wow. Thank you for staying. That's really hard to do. Thank you for staying. Doesn't matter if you were irritable or if you lost your patience, you stayed there. And then when things settled down, you stayed. Like things settled down later that day with my parents, I stayed. So there's an expertise that you have that allowed you to stay. You stayed and then you kept going. Now you're going to add that expertise to your timeline. So you have a timeline of whatever days, years, moments you want on your timeline. And then you've added in your significance in those moments. And now you're going to add in your expertise, which allowed you to be significant. It could be that you stayed realistic when everybody else stayed in denial. Wow. It could be that you are empathetic, which allowed you to understand what it would be like if you left. Like, could you imagine if I left when my sister and brother did that day? Oh my gosh, what would my parents have done? Oh, if I didn't go back the next day because I was like, oh, they're okay. Yeah, jeez. No, because I knew you also are probably forward thinking. Like you understand the implications of certain things happening. I understood what was happening because my mom was in a hospital bed now. She wasn't going to get up, and we were looking at incontinence care. I got that. You also probably have the courage to ask the tough questions and the courage to receive the difficult news. Your expertise is around being present, having the courage to accept reality. I'm sorry, every time I count down my fingers, the balloons come up. I should sit on my hands, but that's hard for me to do. Okay. And you also have the wisdom around life. That life is about being present during difficult times with others in your life. That life ends, which means we have to be present while life happens. Name those skills, those perspectives, and that wisdom, and then add it to your timeline. So now you're building out a timeline that really honors you. It's no longer about the terrible times. It's no longer about just the terrible times. It's about how you showed up and how you stayed. And then it's that deep look into what is it that you have that allows you to stay? Because again, that's a very unusual gift. My sister and brother couldn't stay. They couldn't. They couldn't. You're different than them. What is it that makes you different? You named your expertise. And that expertise is now what you can use to make your life better today. How can you apply that expertise in your day today? How can you apply it in your career, in a relationship? That expertise didn't just exist then, it's with you now. And it's so helpful to know that because now you can tap into it and use it. It's about using it today, using it in other situations or experiences or relationships. doesn't just live in your past, it lives in you. So how will you use it? And how will your expertise become its next form? It could become a book. It could become a social media campaign. If I had the courage to do this, I could turn my difficult moments with my dad into a social media campaign to help people say, you know what, I wasn't necessarily as kind and compassionate and calm as I wanted to because I was advocating. Now, I'm not sure that's actually a good social media campaign now that I'm saying that out loud, but you can see what's possible. Just to be honest about, there are some times that are so terrible that we feel like the only way we can advocate is to just really have a little bit of a temper tantrum. Your expertise could become a small business. It could be a career change. It could be that you decide, you know what? I've been working with numbers all my life in my career. You know what? Now I want to work with meaningful interactions with people. Your expertise becomes what makes the next terrible day better. Your expertise is what helps you make stronger boundaries because you understand that, you know what, with boundaries, I'm in a better place. So I'm just going to really set and protect my boundaries. Your expertise can create healthier relationships. This fall, I was in a situation in my head thinking through, how do I maintain my relationships with my brother and sister? I can't explain why, but I was really thinking, I'm not sure about this. I've already lost a brother. I have an estranged sister. She's a bit of a nightmare. So I grew up with 5 siblings, and now all of a sudden I only have 2. And I was thinking, I'm not sure I have a really good relationship with them. I feel like it's not really about me in the relationship with them, it's about them. I was thinking, the holidays are coming. Do I really want to spend time with them? I don't think they get me. I don't think they appreciate me. And I thought, well, okay, I'll just go one more time, right? One more Christmas Eve. It's only, I counted it out. It's only 4 hours. I can do it, 4 hours. And I went and I had a great time. And it really is interesting because my brother told that story again about the hospital bed day. And that helped me think, you know what? That's not the story to tell. Huh. And then all of a sudden, I saw myself in a different way in the relationship with them. And I thought, I'm okay continuing the relationship with them. I get that I want a relationship with my siblings. And I also get it doesn't matter if they get me or not, because I got me after I started thinking again about that hospital bed day. I got me. Okay. So here's what you can do. If you'd like to think through your expertise with us, you can join our private group, which is in our community, caringourway.com. And for those who are going to watch the archive or those who have joined me live, I'll send out the link to join. I'll send out the recording with the link to join. And you can tell us about that terrible time. You could tell us about how you're healing because you have a new perspective and how you want to turn that expertise into something else. You could share your timeline with us. You could share a draft of your timeline and then keep working on it and then share where you feel like you've landed as a final timeline. It's just nice to connect to others who are thinking, you know what? I want to turn this into something else other than a terrible time. I want to turn this into my expertise. And then, if you'd like, you can join us in May. We're getting together in Chicago and we're going to talk through basically how do we heal, receive, and plan for ourselves. And then how do we actually go out into the world to better support family caregivers? We'd love for you to think about coming to this. So you can learn more and register through our website, caringourway.com. And that's our community. We have lots of different workshops and events that happen on a regular basis, including chats. We just added 2 new chats. One's a chat for working family caregivers, and the other one is for only children who are caring for parents. We'll continue to add chats. We also sometimes have some interesting programs that we launch. For instance, we're in the midst of launching a program to support those who care for a family member with dementia. So our pilot program offers you 5 free coaching sessions to resolve 3 care challenges. So when you're a part of our community, you get notice of any of our special events, programs, and opportunities you know first. Okay, I hope you found this helpful. And again, you can join us on caringourway.com. I'll send you an invite to join our private group so you can continue to have this conversation with us about your expertise. I'd love to hear how this timeline turns into this expertise and then what you turn your expertise into. Okay, thanks for all you do. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.